Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the POOLBEG PHARMA PLC investor presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged. They can be submitted at any time using the Q&A tab just on the right-hand corner of your screen. Just simply type in your questions at any time and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question received during today's meeting. However, the company can review all questions and will publish any responses where it's appropriate to do so. You'll be notified when they're ready for your review. Before we begin, we'd like to submit the following poll, and as usual, I'm sure the company would be most grateful for your participation. It gives me great pleasure to hand over to CEO Jeremy Skellington. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mark, and thank you for that introduction. And welcome everybody to what will be POOLBEG's last company presentation of the year. And what a terrific year it's been. And again, I greatly appreciate you coming along tonight. I know there's lots of options to do as you wind up to the Christmas, and a little bit of football on TV. So the plan for this evening is to give a presentation in 30 minutes or so, and then we'll obviously transition over to questions and hopefully wrap it up in 45 minutes thereabouts, so we can all get back for the other semi-final. So I want to start with some reflection, looking back at the year 2022 as it was, and just to flag to you all and highlight POOLBEG's accomplishments this year. As you know, we IPO'd in July of last year, and we've had terrific activity along building a pipeline, essentially, having some key recruits, key hires. And I just want to spend a few minutes going through this and again, as I say, highlighting our accomplishments. So the year review, we started off with two very important artificial intelligence deals that have progressed exceedingly well in the time since we started collaborations, building off a collaboration initially with Cytoreason based in Israel around the influenza artificial intelligence model, interrogating some very important, is a very, very unique clinical challenge data. So that's going well. And then secondly, with 1-3 Biotech focused on RSV. And as we know, as we've heard, there's a lot of there's RSV in circulation these days. So it's a virus of importance. And I think the data set that we have is, again, unique. So we're looking for new and novel targets and indeed treatments from that collaboration. So again, as a stated goal at IPO was that we wanted to build a pipeline. Our goal ultimately is for early partnering of these assets. So we in-licensed 2 programs, an immunotherapy for respiratory viral infections broadly beyond influenza, POOLB 002. And thirdly, third program was a vaccine against a bacterial disease called melioidosis. So again, delighted to get those in, strategizing with our infectious disease ambitions. And we also received funding recently from the Irish government to pursue oral vaccine platform. And as you see later on, that's topical for tonight as we talk about what was announced this morning, which is an extension to our collaboration or deals with Anabio around metabolic syndrome. So I'll talk to that later on as well. So again, we did state at IPO that non-dilutive funding would be a core ambition. So great to get our first grant across the line. We've also recently completed the clinical stage of our human challenge study, or LPS challenge study, for our lead asset, POOLB 001. Again, a little rush to the end of the year with all of the RNSs that have gone out. And again, importantly, to protect the intellectual property, we've gotten a number of patents granted this year as well. So very excited about the progress that POOLBEG has made, in the last 11 and a half months, as it were. And again, as I say, we announced this morning a metabolic disease license for oral delivery of proteins and peptides. And we'll speak to that later on. So again, 22 in numbers, we've attended 7 conferences, 33 RNSs went out to keep the markets updated on our activities. We've given 13 investor presentations, which I've enjoyed the interactions very much. Some in person, some online, such as this. I find it very productive to engage with the investors. And more recently, we had our first Capital Markets Day. So it was great to have a number of analysts and investors in the room as we presented our accomplishments, but also our ambitions. And then on the right-hand side, as I say, we're kind of building as a company. We had 2 key recruits this year, David English, who came in to head up our business development activities. And as you know, doing deals will be a core focus for POOLBEG. And we also brought in Sultana Rajbali as a global program director for clinical activities. And again, delighted with having these 2 very experienced professionals on board and pushing the programs forward. And more recently, and in line with our kind of metabolic disease license this morning, we've appointed Professor Brendan Buckley on our scientific advisory board. And Brendan is here by my side. I'll introduce him later on. But Brendan is bringing vast experience for clinical trial execution and regulatory activities over a number of years. I also, again, a popular question on the investor presentations over the months is about me buying shares. There was a window of opportunity late in the summer where I was able to purchase some shares. As I say, I was always an insider, so the brokers agreed that there was a window there, so I took advantage of that. I mentioned then about grant funding, 2.3 million for the oral vaccine delivery platform. We appointed Singer as a joint broker, and again listed on the OTC in the US. Again, we have ambitions to head to the US eventually and list on NASDAQ. So quite a busy, frantic year. I've got a terrific team behind me, so proud of our activities. I think we'll all be happy with a little bit of rest over Christmas before we start 2023 again in full speed with the JP Morgan conference in San Francisco on the agenda. So what I do now, I just want to transition back to I'm sure a lot of you understand the business approach, the business model of Poolbeg and the background to the company, but I spent a few minutes going through where we are with that. So we're building a leading infectious disease-focused biopharma company. We want to be a one-stop shop for pharma and biotech who seek infectious disease assets to add to their pipeline. And I think in a post-COVID world, there's a renewed focus on infectious diseases and having assets in there that they can then market. So we spun out of hVIVO, who many of you might know are experts in running clinical trials for viral challenge studies in particular. And we brought a lot of their assets over with us. So we're kind of viral disease focused, but as you see from the pipeline shortly, building from that. We raised 25 million last year. We have 18.9 million cash by the 30th of June. So it's a slow burn as a word, capital light model. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So targeting infectious diseases, capital light, early out licensing, as I say, we do the early de-risking of the programs, get that early human clinical data, and then partner with pharma. So we're building nicely into gaining some momentum in that direction. So as I say, we have multiple near-term inflection points as well, as we'll later on. But the clinical trial having just the early safety aspect just read out, and looking forward to seeing the full data then in Q2 2023. So we have global rights for all our products. Just to be clear, we do in-license, but then we have global rights to do what we want with them. So when it comes to partnering, that gives us flexibilities on deal types, deal structures, territorial deals, for example. So again, we have a disciplined approach to move all of our programs forward. And I would like to say so far, so good. We're quite happy with our progress. This is what we see as our 4 steps to generating shareholder value. Identifying high potential opportunities, which essentially are these late preclinical, early clinical assets that we can do some clinical studies on and drive value and de-risk the programs. We did mention earlier about non-dilutive funding, infectious disease in particular, post-COVID. There's a lot of activity in government and non-governmental funding bodies to fund programs such as Poolbeg. And of course, the oral vaccine delivery is a good example. So we'll push our programs forward to these early value inflection points, out license with partner, which is our revenue generating stream. And then we'll reinvest those funds back into our pipeline in licensing more programs and keep the cycle going. So as I said, we have some exciting assets in the pipeline right now. And as you see at the bottom, I just want to highlight the appetite that pharma has for doing infectious disease deals in particular. So GSK acquiring Affinivax. They had a pneumococcal vaccine in phase 2, but they bought the whole company for that program and their platform for 2.1 billion. So pharma doesn't mess around when it comes to doing deals. If they like something, they'll purchase and they'll spend money on it. And one good example in our space in particular, Pfizer acquiring ReViral for up to 525 million. And this is for RSV, this respiratory viral disease that we're working on as well. And that's one of our AI collaborations focusing on RSV. So there's a lot of interest in this space. So I think we're in a good position right now and a good space to partner these programs in the future. I will say on the right-hand side, just so we have a portfolio approach to like a multiple shots on goal. And what we want to do is de-risk each program. And those that are successful, then we'll move forward with partnering. And as I say, we do look for clear market opportunities. As I say, the world is looking at infectious diseases right now, even greater focus. So we plan to have assets in those spaces that we can partner with pharma. And as I say, fund externally as best we can. And I think importantly, if you saw from the slide, the first slide that I showed, we have a terrific team behind us, a very experienced team to push the company forward and get the deals done that we need to get done. So very excited about that. So this is our pipeline as it stands today. I will flag at the outset, just at the bottom, as I say, we announced a deal this morning with AnaBio, expanding on the existing vaccine collaboration we have with them for this oral vaccine delivery. Now we're looking at metabolic diseases, which is an adjacency, but similar to the oral vaccine, it is delivering to the gut and into areas where there's significant unmet need and significant markets. But I'll start at the top. POOLBEG severe influenza treatment. As I say, we were happy to announce that we completed the clinical stage of that LPS challenge study. And the last set of patients were dosed just a few weeks ago. So happy they got through. All 36 got to the end of the study and trial. So, and no serious adverse events. So very happy with that. And now the full data analysis happens from now. And again, out-licensing discussions have commenced, during our meetings this year with pharma and biotech. 002 and 003, we're pushing forward, building up development plans, again, seeking non-dilutive funding to push those forward as well. So the two product platforms I want to speak of are the AI programs with RSV program with 1.3 I mentioned earlier on, making terrific progress on this. We started this collaborate 8 or so months ago. They've analyzed a wealth of data that we provided, again, unique, exclusive data, and have come up with some very interesting targets to date. And now the next step of that collaboration, which they're nearly completed, is looking for drugs then that we can you can target and bring into our pipeline. And essentially kind of validate first and then move these forward. And as I say, RSV is an area of terrific importance, but terrific excitement for pharma as well. And then the second one with Cytoreason, who are based in Israel, they're looking at our influenza targets. And they're making good progress as well. We have a meeting with Cytoreason on the agenda at JP Morgan, getting an update, and again, expecting to have full outputs by QT 2023, which again will flag some novel and interesting and exciting targets for influenza studies. So again, so far so good, everything is progressing well. So I'll talk about POOLBEG 001, just to give the update there, because that's aside from the update today on the metabolic syndrome license for oral drugs, we announced an update of our LPS challenge study on Monday. Again, as a reminder, severe influenza is ultimately what we're pursuing. So we have a clinical stage potential blockbuster, potential peak sales of 270 million for influenza alone in Europe and the US. We do flag that we're looking kind of outside that particular indication. We do see there's great potential for P38 inhibitors elsewhere. So we're thinking in that direction. For severe influenza, there's absolutely nothing on the market right now. We're dealing with that cytokine storm that people get when they get severely ill. And again, we see 3 to 5 million people getting severe influenza every year. So it's still a significant unmet need, and it still needs therapeutics like 001 to treat these conditions as they progress into severe influenza for these patients. So again, the phase 1 studies are completed. It's safe and well tolerated. Everybody enrolled last at the end of the trial, which is terrific. Importantly, it's agnostic to viral strain. We're targeting the immune system, not the virus. So regardless of what virus appears every flu season, then this drug has potential for those who progress into severe influenza. And as a small molecule, it's shelf stable. And there's a lot of talk and discussion around pandemic preparedness. So this is ultimately for stockpiling. So again, a very attractive drug potential. So how does it work? So flu virus activates the inflammatory response, the immune system activating a kinase pathway called P38. And what drives then is an overactivation of P38 drives this cytokine storm. And from there, you have tissue damage and lung damage and all the sequelae from that P38 overactivation. Of course, POOLBEG 001 blocks this P38. And from there, it blocks the tissue damage and allows the patients to recover quickly. So again, a very important drug. And as I say, we're on our way to generating that proof of concept data for partnering purposes. Intellectual property is critical in this industry. So we got patents out to 2038 that are granted, and we're expanding all the time. And we hope to give updates on that to the market relatively soon. And looking beyond, as I say, severe influenza as a disease of interest. A reminder, the flu is still out there. I think they're talking about the triple-demic this winter, about COVID still around, RSV is surging, and influenza is around as well. So 1 billion influenza cases annually, 5 to 10 million of these are hospitalized, and there's 500,000 deaths, which is quite significant. But I think beyond that, there's 6x risk of heart attacks, 8x risk of pneumonia, and 8x risk of stroke. So there's a lot of these, again, sequelae. So if you have good therapies, you'll be kind of reducing these numbers. So again, the economic burden is pretty significant in the US. They're talking about 11.2 billion alone. So it's a significant market, significant unmet need. And again, talking about the challenge study that we've just completed the clinical stage of. We ran this in the Netherlands with a group called CHDR. So it's an LPS challenge trial. And what LPS does, this is a bacterial fragment. So it triggers the inflammatory response, the immune response, similar to what an influenza virus will do. So you're mimicking that inflammatory response. And you just want to show the demonstration that P38 will block that pathway. But first things first was to confirm that it's safe. This has already been through a phase 1 in healthy volunteers. And it was important to reproduce the data here when it comes to patients that have been inflamed by the presence of LPS. And importantly, we gave LPS both intravenously to get systemic inflammation and then intradermally under the skin to get that localized inflammation. And again, happily, there was no serious adverse events for the 36 volunteers that were enrolled. So that was a great milestone, let's say, to pass, to get through. And then on the next step is the full data readout. I do want to comment. I know there were some messages on the boards that people were expecting more data to come from this readout. I think there might have been kind of statements earlier on about we were going to do interim data and maybe a misunderstanding of what interim contained. And I think from our purposes, you'll see in a slide later on, there's a lot of analysis that is going on right now. And I'll explain later, but that's what's going on in this next phase, which actually demonstrates and proves that kind of, the full efficacy of the program. So on the bottom, we talk about the key highlights here. So no further clinical activity is required, no serious adverse events, safe and well tolerated. Full data readout in Q2 2023. And you'll see down at the bottom here, the intradermal and intravenous were dosed day 4, day 6. 3 different doses of LPS, 3 different doses of POOLB 001 were given. And this is important as we progress into partnering discussions of what's the best dose of POOLB 001 to use in these influenza studies, severe influenza studies that will follow. So with the comprehensive data package that we'll be building, we'll have these discussions with pharma to keep them updated as these data comes through to us. And again, importantly, we're at the JP Morgan conference in San Francisco next month to continue our discussions with pharma around these activities. And again, just highlighting from the comments on the board, this is what's left to do. And I don't want to overwhelm, I won't go into details here, but there's a lot of analysis going on in the background from the 36 volunteers that includes safety and tolerability, all the details around hematology, the bloods, the chemistry, urine analysis, coagulation, CRP, on each individual volunteer on each individual day they were enrolled in the trial. So a lot of work going on in the labs in the background. Also looking at these pharmacokinetic endpoints, the blood or the molecule in circulation and where it goes and how we excrete it, etc. And then pharmacodynamic, which is the key activities around where the efficacy lies and how your immune system responds to the presence of LPS, and then of course to the presence of the POOLB 001 in the system. This is a blinded study, so we don't know who got drug and who got placebo. So which is again gives greater confidence in the clinical trial data as it comes out and as it will read out in Q2 of this year. And again, as I say, we're excited to be at this stage from a Poolbeg standpoint. Getting to the end of this clinical stage has been a terrific achievement and accomplishment, and we're delighted where we stand for that right now. So on other good news, as I say, expanding our pipeline, we had earlier this year established a collaboration with colleagues at Anabio, who have this very interesting oral delivery platform. We licensed for vaccines in particular, which was the bed, as you see later on, for the non-dilutive funding. And then today we looked at metabolic syndrome as the license moving forward with them as well. This is just a one slide on the oral vaccine platform. Just to remind you, we raised 2.3 million in non-dilutive funding to push that program forward. And in 3 years, that'll be clinical ready, essentially. And that's a collaboration with colleagues at Anabio using their encapsulation technology, Trinity College Dublin, who have adjuvant technology, and University College Dublin, who have antigens against certain diseases. So very excited to have this consortium. And the more we talked with colleagues at Anabio, the more we saw the potential for their technology. So we expanded our license to include, say, metabolic syndrome. And again, they have some very exciting early data, which Professor Buckley will speak to shortly, about the potential to use this technology, this platform, in metabolic syndrome for diseases like obesity and diabetes. So again, we plan to get early human clinical data next year, again, part of the business strategy for Poolbeg. And Professor Buckley will speak to that shortly. But I do want to introduce Professor Buckley. As we announced, he's come on board as a scientific advisory board member. He's actually a good friend of Poolbeg's. He's helped us from the very beginning as part of the IPO and setting strategy. He's got 40 years or so experience in the medical field. He was former chief medical officer at Icon Clinical Research, graduated in medicine from University College Cork. He got his doctoral in biochemistry at Faculty of Medicine in Oxford, again, lots of experience in metabolic diseases, as a practicing physician. But he's also very involved in setting regulatory strategies at EMA and publishing, multiple papers over many years on metabolic diseases. And again, couldn't be happier that Brendan's on board to help with these trials with Anabio around the GLP-1 space. So I'll hand it over to Brendan and introduce him, and look forward to. I'll wrap up then at the end when it comes to finishing out the presentation.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Jeremy. We can. Okay, so when we became more familiar and more conversant with Anabio's technology, it became clear that there was an opportunity beyond vaccines to protect a payload that we could deliver into the gut by using their encapsulation system. Now, the problem about delivering peptides in particular is that the gut is designed specifically to get rid of stuff like peptides, to break them down so that we absorb amino acids. So the low pH in the stomach, the protein degrading enzymes in the gut, and the tendency of the gut to exclude peptides are all barriers to getting peptides through orally. So that's why we inject things like insulin and GLP-1. And we felt that it would be a pity to neglect the opportunity of exploring the potential of this encapsulation technology. So it doesn't represent a pivot or anything like that for us away from infectious disease. This is just a logical progression in using a platform to see whether we can achieve something in a significantly different therapeutic area. But actually, it's not fundamentally different. We're protecting vaccines with the encapsulation. These are peptides frequently, and we're protecting a different kind of peptide in what we want to do with metabolic disease. So basically, what Anabio have done is to develop and commercialize encapsulation technology as a delivery system for fragile bioactives in food and beverages. So hitherto, they've been a food-focused company, and they're very successful, and their products are used quite extensively in foodstuffs. The protection of the payload inside in the capsule basically means that the contents, the payload, is protected against heat. It's got a long shelf stability. It can be taken in as a solid, in the form of a food product or in solution or in a capsule or whatever. It's 100% protected from the harsh acid environment of the stomach. And by designing the capsule appropriately, we can gear the uptake to the particular part of the gut that we want. Anabio, through a subsidiary which they set up called Insucaps, did a proof of principle with a very small number of volunteers, in which they gave insulin, which was enclosed in their capsule material, orally to patients, and they showed that the insulin lowered blood glucose. They then took another compound called liraglutide, and this is a metabolic disease product used in diabetes and in obesity, and delivering that orally, again, it lowered blood glucose. And that's a very simple signal that these fragile peptides are getting into the gut. Now, lest anybody thinks that we're going to start developing oral insulins, we're not. Many people have attempted to get insulin into diabetics by means other than injection, and to be honest, it has been a graveyard of capital. Anabio have considerable capabilities. They're based in the middle of one of Europe's biggest pharma manufacturing clusters in Ireland. And they have a long ability to make these capsules appropriately. So what we have agreed with them is that we want to extend a bigger clinical trial, which is still a proof of principle. We're not calling it a phase 1 or a phase 2 or anything. This is an exploratory study to see whether we proceed with this approach, given that we have access to encapsulation. So we will commence we have already commenced the planning and the organization of that trial. It will have to go through regulatory hoops and hurdles. It will have to have protocols written and agreed, investigators and sites recruited and so forth. And that will take about a year from now. So we plan that a clinical trial will commence. Sorry, I beg your pardon. That will take, let me go back. I've got myself arsewise, if you pardon the expression. Sorry, no, we're here. We're grand. The slides are okay. I've been jumping into something else in my head. So the planning has already proceeded from that. We've been working on this for about a year, and the clinical trial will proceed early in the new year of 2023, in a month or so time. And this is a feasibility clinical trial to determine whether the microencapsulation technology can safely deliver liraglutide. Now, liraglutide is a thing called a glucagon-like peptide 1 receptor agonist, GLP-1 agonist. These have been around, and liraglutide has been around for about 15 years in clinical practice. It will shortly be off patent, and it's an injectable. And we want to see whether by encapsulating it, we can get it into the gut effectively. The nice thing about liraglutide is that one of its main sites of action is in the gut anyway. So it makes a great deal of logical sense to deliver it to the gut where a principal site of action is occurring. And oral delivery of this stuff can solve a lot of problems. So it's often easier to produce than an injectable. It's much more stable. It's a lot easier to distribute, no cold chain and so forth, long half-life. And also, it's a lot easier to administer than an injection. So you don't need training, you don't need special diabetes nurses. Needle phobia doesn't enter into it. There are no sharps or biohazard waste. And there's a much lower cost of access. So we can open up, if we think globally, we can open up access to this very powerful medicine. And the indication for this is in diabetes, particularly type 2 diabetes, and in obesity. GLP-1 agonists currently are very fast growing. They're estimated to grow to a 22 billion per annum market by 2025. And I can tell you that the current manufacturers of injectable GLP-1 agonists have had real difficulty in keeping up with demand. The overall market in metabolic diseases, if you include just diabetes and obesity, is truly enormous. So expanding our license to Anabio's encapsulation technology is a really attractive opportunity for us to deliver proteins which are protected, peptides and proteins which are protected by the encapsulation. And we felt that it would be remiss of us not to take this opportunity of an extra shot on goal, given our access to the encapsulation. There are lots of health and cost benefits compared to injection. Potential has been demonstrated in very small clinical trials so far, but we're about to move it further and test that principle more rigorously. And our next stage feasibility study, starting in a month or so, pardon me for misleading earlier on, that will add significant value to the program, and it will make it really attractive for partnering. We're quite confident in this. Jeremy.
Thank you, Brent. Appreciate Brendan's insights there. As I say, it's exciting time for Poolbeg as we expand. As I say, that's terrific. So what I do want to say is, again, summarizing in the end, this is a strong investment case, Poolbeg overall. As I say, we've demonstrated, I believe, this year our ability to execute. The fact that we had stated strategies at the beginning of the company at IPO, and we've hit those goals along the way. So again, near-term inflection points, of which there are many, is the full data readout from 001. I did share the slide of all of the data analysis that's going on right now from the 36 volunteers and the 3 different doses of drug, etc. So that'll be interesting, and as I say, that'll give that kind of proof of concept data for partnering studies. Expecting additional information from our RSV, Artificial Intelligence Program of 1.3, expected by the end of the year. I know we're kind of mid-December, but we're still working way hard to accomplish the stated goals. The influenza AI program, I stated, was we'd have the outputs in Q2 of next year, which would be fascinating. What new targets we could pursue for influenza, which again is a growing issue, continuing issue. Beginning the consortium work plan for the DTIF funded oral vaccine platform, as I mentioned, with our colleagues at Anabio, Trinity, and University College Dublin. As Brendan mentioned, commencing the GLP-1 feasibility clinical trial early next year. So that's, as I say, planning is ongoing, clinical trial side, principal investigators, etc. And again, expanding 001 to new indications. Again, remind you, we have an experienced team. We've recruited well, not only from the outset, but recent additional members, including David and Sultana, and then, of course, adding Brendan as SAB member. Again, we have a smart capital efficient model and pushing this forward, 18.9 million by the middle of the year, and again, supplementing with oral vaccines. And again, we're in no better place right now, but for infectious diseases. So again, very exciting time for the company. Greatly appreciate you joining us tonight for this discussion. And I believe, in summary, that Poolbeg is well positioned to create sustainable shareholder value well into the future.
That's great.
Again, appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Jeremy, thank you very much indeed for updating investors this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions using the Q&A tab just situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Just to give Jeremy a few minutes, I guess, a few seconds to review those questions submitted already, I'd just like to remind you that a recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, will be accessible via your Investor Meet company dashboard. Jeremy, I've given you no time at all. You've got a significant number of attendees on today's call and lots of questions. If I could ask you to open up the Q&A tab, and if I could ask you to read out the questions and then give a response where it's appropriate to do so, and I'll pick up from you at the end. And obviously, there are a number of questions that are of a similar nature, so I guess what we've done is try to make sure that we give you the best coverage that we can. So over to you, sir, if we may.
Appreciate that. Appreciate just a little time to have a sip of water. I will say I did get, there was an interesting comment on the boards about, I was at a presentation that I recorded, it was last Friday for the 001 announcement. I was actually under the weather. I mean, being in infectious diseases, I had a cold at the time, so somebody was commenting that I wasn't my usual effervescent self. So apologies for that. I'll try to do better in future, but I'll say the cold is passing right now, but I appreciate that. But yeah, let's kind of read through a few of these from Harry G. Which of Poolbeg's plans for next year are you most excited about? That's like, which is my favorite child? It's a difficult one, but I'm most excited. I think they all have potential. Okay, I'll say it at the outset. Obviously, I'll state that looking forward to the readout from 001 and then the partnering activities that will follow. I think for any biotech company, any small biotech company, getting into the clinic, getting out the other side of the clinic, safety, and then getting some efficacy, it's very exciting, and it's a key value driver. So I'm looking forward to getting those data. So again, that's going to be kind of a Q2 of next year. So obviously they'll be churning the numbers for all of those data points for those 36 volunteers. So that's exciting. But if I was to pick one other, I think the artificial intelligence analysis will be groundbreaking. I think back to the stories that were told about how POB 001 was identified, how P38 was identified as a key driver of severe influenza was from colleagues at hVivo, who we spun out of. And they'd spent many, many years looking at the same data that we have, that we're not using with AI. And from that, it took them several years to identify, several targets, narrow it down, eventually coming up with P38. We're doing the same work in 9 months when it comes to the RSV analysis, and essentially 12 months when it comes to the influenza analysis, which is quite remarkable. It's just the advancement of AI, and what will come out of that, again, will be groundbreaking, I think, for the company, and potentially groundbreaking for the disease sector itself. So we, as I mentioned, we're at JP Morgan next month. We've had requests from pharma to talk specifically about the AI data and the AI analysis, because a lot of pharma companies are moving in that space. And again, an obvious example is Pfizer had spent 110 million to extend their collaboration with Cytoreason, who we are collaborating with as well. So pharma are looking closely in this direction, and they're always looking for new targets in these diseases. So I think that's something I'm very excited about, the outputs from the AI. So sorry, maybe I do have a favorite child, but we'll as I say, those two in particular I'm very excited about, but everything else has potential. Claire, and could Cytoreason's AI capabilities be applied to metabolic areas announced with Encapsulation today? That's an interesting question, particularly with as I said, the clinical data. What Cytoreason look for is clean clinical data, and then they can analyze that. And obviously, we didn't go into it tonight. Maybe in the next presentation, I'll go deeper into the AI discussions, but they're able to look deeply into those immune responses. With Pfizer, they're looking for cancer cells and cancer immunotherapies. I think for others, I'm not too sure if they're looking in the metabolic space, but it's certainly something of interest. I know, Brendan, do you want?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I think for us, the immediate interest in the metabolic disease space is simply in employing the capsule technology that we already have, essentially protecting a payload of a peptide. So I'm not sure that we are that interested in looking for entirely new metabolic disease targets. And I think we would probably still stick to the benefit that we have in our absolutely unique database and biobank relating to challenge studies on infectious disease. So nobody in the world has a database that goes back to just after the Second World War that we can mine intelligently now for targets. So I think we're not going to go off and become a metabolic disease company in any sense. Yeah. This is an opportunistic, potentially very interesting and very valuable opportunities, nevertheless. Yeah. But I think we will always be at heart an infectious disease company, because our huge resource, the heritage we have, is in challenge study data going back, right to late 40s.
Fabulous. Yeah, and just to add to that, and maybe it kind of links in as well, that from our demerger from Open Orphan as it was, or hVivo right now, we do have access to other infectious disease programs, including they have a new malaria model, for example, and they've also ran that COVID study for the vaccine task force in the UK. So we could potentially take other data sets and collaborate with Cytoreason. We've mentioned this, that we haven't kind of actually progressed that, but it's kind of something we potentially could do in the future. So again, AI, I think, is the way of the future to analyze these unique data sets. Thank you for that. The question here from Chris G. Jeremy, could you tell me why there was no efficacy data as promised in the RNS on Monday? As I mentioned earlier on, the efficacy data is kind of part of this next step analysis. The initial data that we spoke about was obviously just confirming safety, and that we knew there was a good likelihood, but we just wanted to be sure that in this inflammatory setting where these volunteers had lipopolysaccharide in their systems, that the drug was still safe. Again, drug discovery clinical trials can be quite challenging, as it were, pardon the pun. But we were happy to see that the efficacy will come next. And as I say, we're all excited to see that. And 3 different doses, so we're hoping that there'll be a good window of opportunity, a good therapeutic window when it comes to identifying the correct dose to take forward from there. let's see here. Where can shareholders access information on the clinical trial of POOLB 001? There is nothing on clinicaltrials.gov. That's actually something we have discussions with the FDA about putting up. There's not a requirement. This is a phase 1B challenge study. There's not a requirement to put phase 1 studies, on clinicaltrials.gov, for example. Phase 2s and phase 3s, yes, absolutely, and phase 4s. But phase 1 is not a requirement. But we are actually in discussions about getting that up. They'll allow it, so we're in discussions about putting that up for the very reason that you asked, that people are inquiring. So just to be clear, it's not like we're hiding from it. The trial is active and ongoing. So we'll get back to you on that with regard to timing. Cool. Robin D asks, do you envisage Poolbeg continuing to expand outside infectious disease, or were these special circumstances here, the existing relationship with Anabio, that are likely to make this initiative a once-off? It's a good question. I think, we do say we're infectious disease focused. I do think this was opportunistic, again, collaborating with Anabio, their technology, as the expression goes, does what it says on the tin. They have that interesting early human data where you are looking at the effect of liraglutide on the glucose response. So again, we want to kind of build that out further. We see this ultimately from a Poolbeg standpoint as partnerable. So you'll get that early data. There are liraglutides out there, all but one are injectables. So again, there's a demand, there's an ask, there's an interest in orally delivering this GLP-1 agonist. So if we can get that clinical trial, as Professor Buckley spoke about, and get that early human data, again, part of our remit, we see that something is partnerable. So maybe a one-up, but again, we're opportunistic when it comes to exciting opportunities, but we won't lose the ball on the infectious disease focus of the company. Thank you for that. Have you patented POOLB 001 for stopping cytokine storm in COVID? Really good question. Where we started out was a hypercytokinemia, which is cytokine storm in severe influenza. That's where we had the data. That's where we had the information. And obviously, when it comes to filing patents, it's based on novelty and have data being generated. So we did not have that for COVID. And I think if you recall back, this is part of the vaccine task force as well, and part of the lot of studies that were going on. They essentially threw everything, at the time to help these severe COVID patients. There was some interleukins or anti-leukin antibodies worked. A lot of things didn't work. But I think we've missed that window. But I think as a company, we've had discussions around, COVID now is being very well addressed. I think the virus is mutating. There's different strains emerging. But I think pharma and the vaccines are pursuing that very well. So I think, we look up in other areas where we see there's a greater potential for Poolbeg to play a significant role. Okay. Question here. Dave, or when you out-license POOLB1, are you likely to receive a substantial upfront payment? And if not, when are first revenues anticipated? Standards in the industry, as we see this type of deal or this type of deal structure, will be an upfront with downstream milestones and revenues. And just to explain a little bit more, it's essentially passing across the program, passing across the asset to our collaborator. They will fund it, they will run it, and upon success, we get paid. Now, there could be scenarios where we co-develop it, but our strong preference is for a pharma partner to take it over and drive it forward. So yes, the standard in the industry is upfront payments, milestones, royalties, kind of into the future. And again, from a Poolbeg standpoint, we have multiple shots on goal. You're right about POOLB 001. That's our first one. And, but obviously we're looking for the other programs moving forward. And indeed, even the AI data that comes out of here. So I think that, there's great potential for that and our other programs. Question here from Sparky J. Great name. Are we already in discussions to reverse into any NASDAQ listed companies? And should it be viewed as a way of raising capital with a cash-rich company, which Poolbeg bringing good products to the table? We know that we had 18.9 million 6 months ago. What's it looking like the year end of 2022? So there's a few questions in there, but yes, Cathal, I think, mentioned at a recent presentation, we continue to look out for some NASDAQ companies that could do with a cash injection, maybe a pipeline of their own. And we have spoke to several, and we'll continue to do so. We're looking for that right opportunity. So we do, again, as I say, there's good ambition that Poolbeg will eventually end up on the US market. And it's good for fundraising. It's good, I think, for getting into a larger market, as I say, from a share price standpoint, more greater liquidity, for example. And again, maybe the sum of the two companies will drive a larger response. So yeah, it's still on the horizon. As I say, there discussions we're scouting. There's a lot of companies out there that Cathal calls fallen angels that we're exploring to see what's a good fit for Poolbeg. And then the bottom question was, or the question around the cash balance at the end of the year. Obviously, we haven't ran the full numbers. There's still a couple of weeks left at the end of the year. We'll talk about that next year. I think it's in March. We have our audit updates or annual updates on the finances. So we'll address that. Just keep a close eye on time. Let's take one more question because I'm sure you're eager to get back to the football. Henrik, and what size do we have on the oral obesity delivery market? And what news on the US listing? Sorry, I've just answered that. On the oral obesity delivery market, I mean, obesity is frighteningly large. I think it's a growing issue. It's a significant issue. I think there's two. Yes, I was looking at this. Thank you. The obesity has nearly tripled since 1975. US healthcare system, it cost them 173 billion, and global obesity sales in 2030, so not too long ago, 54 billion. So again, with this kind of program, and there has been progress in the obesity space of late, but if we can kind of edge ourselves in there through a partner, obviously, and get a share of that market, it can be quite significant. And I think, obviously, from a Poolbeg standpoint, from a CEO standpoint, it would be wonderful to have a significant role to play in treating this disease, as I say, with, again, pardon the pun, which is kind of growing and is causing significant issues for other health aspects. I mean, we all know that obesity creates issues, drives cancer, cardiovascular disease, etc. So yes, I mean, it's a large market and growing, so we hope to play a role.
Okay.
So on that note, again, on behalf of Professor Buckley and myself, thank you for taking the time this evening. I hope you all have a good end of the year, have a great Christmas, and we'll see you all again early in the new year and keep you continually updated on Poolbeg's activities. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed for updating investors this afternoon. Could I please ask the investors on the call not to close this session, as we'll now automatically redirect you for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the management team can really better understand your views and expectations. This will take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of Poolbeg Pharma, we'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation. Good evening to you all.